In the history of work, few milestones have carried the weight of moral clarity quite like the global effort to reintegrate individuals with disabilities into the workforce. As economies modernized and labor markets evolved, a stark reality emerged. Without inclusive frameworks, we were not merely overlooking potential, we were undermining human dignity itself.
Part of the problem is, as long as this cost of taking care of your injured workers, if you want, was a tolerable cost, then it was just a cost of doing business. It sounds crass, but it just was. It's like, some stores say we can have, theft of 7% or something, and that's the cost of doing business, and it wasn't quite that bad, but not far off.
I used to use the analogy that when I worked in the paper industry, that we would think nothing of when a big motor on a paper machine burned out, a $100,000 motor. We wouldn't throw a motor on the junk pile. We would carefully rewind the coils, we would adjust the contacts, we would put that asset back to work. But traditionally, we haven't looked at human assets that way.
Over the last 3 decades, a quiet revolution has been unfolding. One not heralded with fanfare, but rather built through persistence, policy, and principled pragmatism. This is the story of disability management, not as charity, but as strategy. Not as obligation, but as opportunity. From boardrooms to legislative chambers, from forest work sites to United Nations offices, an unlikely coalition of labor, industry, government, and academia coalesced around a common question. How do we ensure that those injured and disabled are not cast aside, but supported, retrained, retained, and respected? We begin where that question first ignited a movement. Can a moment of injury become a catalyst for inclusion? In 1987, in the woodlands of Canada, a group of disabled forestry workers posed this very question. Not to theorists, but to their communities, their unions, their employers, and their government. Their efforts culminated in a powerful national television documentary, Every 12 Seconds, a title that reflected a staggering reality. In Canada, an industrial accident occurred every 12 seconds. But it was more than a film, it was a wake-up call. It captured not only the frequency of workplace injuries, but also the systemic failure to support those affected. Out of this reckoning, a new coalition emerged. Study tours to Australia and Germany introduced Canadian stakeholders to international models of rehabilitation and reintegration. These insights became the bedrock for a bold initiative, the founding of the National Institute of Disability Management and Research, or NIDMAR.
When the group got together to become NIDMAR, we'd learned a lot together. We'd gone to Germany. We had looked at best practices. We had talked to lots and lots of people and their families, and we're so committed that we were going to make a difference. And so in the first meeting, there was some union representatives. I was the employer representative. We had some government representatives, some workers' compensation, the predecessor to WorkSafe BC there. And literally with probably $5,000 or $6,000 in the bank, we sat around and said, for this to be important, we're going to be internationally recognized as a center of excellence for research and pragmatic early return to work. And it literally, people signed up for that all around the table.
In 1994, NIDMAR opened its doors in partnership with a local college in Port Alberni, British Columbia. From its inception, it was anchored in a singular vision: to professionalize disability management through education, standards, and international collaboration. That vision became tangible in 1995 when, in a groundbreaking gesture of international solidarity, Germany's Ministry of Labor granted NIDMAR the license to replicate its cutting-edge rehabilitation information system in Canada. The signing ceremony held at the BC Government Cabinet Office signaled a rare moment of cross-border policy innovation. At the heart of NIDMAR's early work was a comprehensive curriculum developed through a rigorous process called DACUM, or Design a Curriculum. Industry, labor, workers' compensation boards, and academics joined forces, not just to teach disability management, but to institutionalize it. The curriculum addressed critical components, accommodating workers, facilitating return-to-work processes, and ensuring that every workplace had someone qualified to lead this transformation. By 1995, the first students graduated from what would become Canada's, and indeed the world's, first certificate program in disability management. Soon after, the University of British Columbia endorsed the program, awarding graduates a joint UBC NIDMAR certificate. The endorsement wasn't merely academic, it was a declaration that this field merited the same intellectual rigor as any other professional discipline. As demand grew, NIDMAR innovated again. In 2001, it launched an online format, allowing professionals across Canada to access the program without geographic or occupational disruption. The shift to online delivery expanded reach and democratized access. Then, in 2014, a new chapter began. Pacific Coast University for Workplace Health Sciences integrated the certificate program into its offerings, signaling a maturation of the field. What began in the forested valleys of British Columbia was now part of a global educational infrastructure, and the world was watching. In 2002, Germany's Federal Workers' Compensation Board became the first international body to license the program. Since then, over 15 countries have followed suit.
One of the things I'm most proud of is the establishment of the Pacific Coast University. And the reason being is that in order for us to establish that, we had to get legislation through the provincial government and had to be all consensus of all political parties. And to be honest about it, it was somewhat of a long shot to try to get unanimous consent, because in politics today, you probably wouldn't get politicians to agree what time of day it is or what day of the week. And the fact is that we've been able to achieve that. And if you look at the programs and the education that we'll be able to provide, it's now accepted in 22 countries. So it's really continuing to grow. It's making a huge difference in society, even though we've still got a long ways to go.
As the new Labour co-chair, I would definitely be excited and thrilled to see the expanded role of CDMPs into all facets of society at large. They are the secret weapons to ensure that there is successful return to work, early interventions. They have the knowledge, they have the expertise, and they will be your beacons of guidance to ensure that there are successful returns to work, returns on your investment in your workplaces.
From one certificate in one corner of Canada to a global standard in education, this illustrates a simple yet powerful truth. When education is built on empathy and evidence, it doesn't just inform, it transforms. But education alone does not create change. It must be matched with policy. And policy, to endure, must be codified. Which brings us to the next chapter in this global story. How does a national innovation become a global standard? The answer begins, as many great global endeavors do, in Geneva. In 1998, the International Labour Organization, one of the oldest United Nations agencies, embarked on a 10-country research initiative to investigate workplace-based strategies for managing disability. It was more than simply a study. It was an inquiry into whether equity and economic performance could, in fact, go hand in hand. Canada, through NIDMAR, was chosen to serve as a thematic analyst. Drawing on years of field experience, NIDMAR helped identify common success factors across diverse industrial and national landscapes. It was a striking moment of intellectual clarity. Despite jurisdictional differences, the most effective programs all shared core principles: early intervention, collaborative support, and sustained reintegration. From this research emerged a bold proposition. NIDMAR, building on Canada's leadership, drafted the Canadian Code of Practice for Disability Management, a framework that fused evidence with actionable guidance. It was the first of its kind in the world. When Canada's Minister of Labour at the time, Claudette Bradshaw, formally submitted the Canadian Code to ILO Director General Juan Somavia, It became more than a national blueprint, it became a candidate for global adoption.
Back in the days, I always used to say that, if someone's injured, is that people would rather want someone that's got both arms and both legs and those sorts of things, and that mentality has to change. And the only way you can change some of that is you're going to have strong legislative mandates from provincial and federal authorities, which we're moving in that particular direction, but we still have a long ways to go. Because if you look at the statistics in regards to the amount of people that are disabled without jobs and living in poverty is horrendous. Because what we've seen in society so far, that anybody that is injured, basically they're pushed to the curb of society. And the fact is that, high depression rate, high suicide rate, and all those things that go on. So by giving employment to the individuals that they can still continue to fend for their families and look after their children is a key situation. I've also always said that, look, at one of the biggest assets that any employer has, it's its employees. And my view is that they have an obligation, because no one gets up in the morning to go to work to get injured or to get killed.
The International Labour Organization did not hesitate. Drawing directly from the Canadian model, the ILO published the International Code of Practice on Managing Disability in the Workplace in 2001. It has since been translated into more than 22 languages, becoming a touchstone document for countries seeking to balance legal compliance with moral responsibility. This was so much more than the export of policy. It was the globalization of dignity. It reinforced a growing consensus that the right to work, regardless of ability, is not a cultural nicety, but a universal principle. Yet, as every policymaker knows, consensus on paper must be galvanized in person. And for that, the global community needed a forum, a place where ideas could meet implementation and theory could meet testimony. What happens when the world comes together to collaborate? The answer took shape in May 2002 when NIDMAR hosted in Vancouver an unprecedented gathering, the inaugural International Forum on Disability Management. 400 delegates, 10 countries, countless perspectives, but a singular goal: to retain workers rather than replace them. The forum opened with dignitaries from both sides of the Atlantic. BC's Lieutenant Governor Iona Campagnola, Canada's Federal Minister of Labour Claudette Bradshaw, and Germany's Minister of Labour and Social Affairs Walter Riester. Their presence sent a clear message. Disability management had moved from the margins of occupational health to the core of workforce policy. And so began a tradition. Every 2 years, the IFDM has convened. At each juncture, the forum has done more than share research. It has built bridges between developed and developing economies, between insurers and advocates, between policymakers and those whose lives are shaped by their policies.
The significance of Pacific Coast University hosting the International Forum on Disability Management is that it's the little engine that could. It is this tiny little jewel of a university on Vancouver Island, and it has been able to attract so many countries, so many academics, so many professionals in this field to come here and participate in a conversation like this. It speaks to the credibility of the university, and this forum, the number of delegates who are here, the richness and the depth of the conversations says everything about it.
The IFDM is not just a conference, it's an ecosystem, a living demonstration that when nations work together, progress does not just scale, it accelerates. But global gatherings, however inspiring, require rigorous foundations. If the field of disability management was to be taken seriously, if it was to influence legislation, workplace practice, and professional identity, it needed what every credible profession needs: standards. Can we professionalize compassion? It's a question as bold as it is necessary, and in 1999, Canada answered with an emphatic yes. Working with the Occupational Standards Branch of Employment and Social Development Canada, NIDMAR developed the world's first occupational standards in disability management. This was not a symbolic gesture. It was an undertaking of scale, scope, and scientific precision. The process adhered to the highest government and international benchmarks, a literature review, a labor market analysis spanning every Canadian province and territory. validation through 2 national conferences, and most critically, ongoing review by 2 authoritative committees, one executive, the other composed of frontline practitioners. These standards served as the foundation for the next logical step, certification. By 2003, Canada and Germany jointly administered the first exams for the Certified Disability Management Professional designation. The standards conformed not only to Canadian guidelines but also to ISO and NOCA standards, ensuring global credibility. Today, through licensing agreements, professionals holding the CDMP designation are working in over 22 countries. The certification has become a passport of proficiency, affirming that the bearer possesses the skills, knowledge, and ethical grounding to navigate the complex terrain of workplace disability management. Still, if we are to shape the world of work, we must also shape the workplaces themselves. That's where program standards and audit and assessment tools come in, to measure intent and validate impact. What gets measured gets improved, but what if we never knew what to measure? That question guided the next frontier of the disability management movement. After years of research, including NIDMAR's landmark participation as a thematic analyst in the ILO's Global Research Project, it became evident that effective disability management programs shared identifiable characteristics: early intervention, stakeholder collaboration, and clear accountability structures among them. But identifying best practices was only the beginning. The real challenge was translating insights into infrastructure. NIDMAR responded by developing a robust set of program audit and assessment tools, systems to evaluate not just whether policies existed, but whether they worked. The centerpiece was the Consensus-Based Disability Management Audit, a detailed framework comprising 180 questions across 16 strategic areas. With a 5-tiered response structure, it allowed organizations to map out both compliance and capacity. Those scoring 80% and above earned recognition from the International Disability Management Standards Council, a mark of excellence grounded in evidence. But what about smaller organizations, non-industrial workplaces without the bandwidth for large-scale audits? Here, too, innovation followed. Through a rigorous regression analysis, NIDMAR developed the Workplace Disability Management Assessment, a streamlined 72-question version tailored to more compact operations. It offered the same integrity of structure, the same strategic insight, and the same 5-level response framework, but with accessibility at its core. Together, these tools have been licensed in more than 6 countries and applied in both public and private sectors. They do more than assess, they empower. They offer a mirror in which institutions can see themselves as employers, as well as enablers of potential. What does a just society owe its workers? Not just in moments of triumph, but in moments of vulnerability. 30 years ago, that question may have sounded philosophical. Today, it's the foundation of policy, of practice, and of principle. The history of disability management is a mirror to the values of modern governance. It reminds us that the integrity of our institutions is measured not by how they serve the strong, but by how they support those facing adversity. Through education, through international codes, through standards and audit tools, the global disability management movement has redefined the very architecture of inclusion. It is proven that dignity and productivity are not opposing forces, they are interdependent. It has also shown us what's possible when nations work in concert. When policymakers, unions, businesses, and universities come together around shared evidence, shared goals, and, most importantly, shared humanity.
Well, I've been on the board for 30 years. It's time for me to move on. And the fact is, I'm very pleased to turn this over to Sari Saranen, who is going to take on the role as the Labour co-chair, and I'm very confident that she'll continue to look after the best interests of workers in the workplace and to the future.
Ken has been a steady hand, and how do we continue that? It's not just a one-shot deal, but it is for next generation of participants and and next generation of leadership for Pacific Coast University and NIDMAR.
This is not the end of the story. It's the foundation for the next chapter. Because as work continues to change through technology, demographics, and global pressures, so too must our commitment to ensuring that no worker is left behind. In the world we're building, disability is not disqualification. It's a test of our systems, our solidarity, and our will. And for 30 years, that will has held strong. Let it hold and let it grow. Because when we create standards that center on dignity, we do not just build better workplaces, we build better societies.